introduce yourself. Where are you from?
My name is Daniil. I'm from Kiev.
Which battalion do you serve in?
I serve in the 47th Brigade's Strike Unmanned Aerial Systems Company.
Please tell us about your family.
My father is not around. It's just my mom, my brother, and my sister.
And where is your father?
I've never seen my dad. Dad left. My mom told me that when I was 2 years old, she broke a vase over his head, and from that moment on, he never came back.
Have you tried to get in touch with your father recently?
Once, I was taking the train to my grandma's, and my mom was sitting with me. She said, "Your dad is sitting 2 rows over." She told me, "If you want, you can go meet him." At that moment, I was both scared and didn't really want to, so I didn't go to meet him. So I've never actually seen my dad in person. I was probably about 12 years old. Now I'm 29. And by the way, he ran away. He got off one station earlier, so that just shows I did the right thing.
So you don't regret not meeting your father?
Absolutely not. He's just my biological dad. I don't feel any love for him. Honestly, I don't care. He's a stranger to me.
Could you please tell me about your mom?
My mom is a very strong woman. Young and beautiful. She had me when she was very young. She had a choice. Either I would be raised in the village, or she would take matters into her own hands and secure a future for both of us. And that's exactly what she did. She left me with my grandmother. So basically, I was raised by my grandma and grandpa, and she went to Kiev to work. She was a train attendant. It was the Kiev-Moscow train, number 2. She worked there, and maybe at that time I even had some inner resentments, the kind you have when you're young. I don't have them now, but maybe back then, as a teenager, I had resentments toward her. But now, as an adult, I understand why she did it, why she left. She was there, and then she disappeared. I would run around saying, "Mom, Mom, where are you, Mom?" Mom went away to work.
Do you keep in touch with her more now, or do you just know where she is?
Because of my service, not as often as I'd like, but I wouldn't say it's very often either. She moved around a lot. I mean, I had a stepfather, and when I came back from the war in 2015, by that time she had already divorced him and moved to Chernihiv. And I had a choice, either go with her to Chernihiv or stay in Kiev, because my stepfather had completely cut off all ties there. He said he wasn't happy to see me there and that I needed to find my own path in life from then on. From that moment on, my mom was always traveling. I stayed in Kiev.
Why the Frenchman?
That's a story that has stuck with me since school. That dumb teacher humor, you know, the kind teachers have. My name is Daniil, and she asked in front of the class, "Are you French or something?" And then the guys, after hearing that, started sticking that label on me. Then, you know, the time of social networks like VKontakte came around, and that's how I signed myself, Tanya the Frenchman. There was this football subculture, and that's where the nickname really stuck. It was trendy there to have your own nickname. In Azov, they straight up told me, "Come up with a call sign for yourself." I said a Frenchman, and now a lot of people don't even know my real name, but they're always happy to see me. Frenchman.
Could you tell me about your youth?
The youth was extremely active. It took place in Kiev. Nivki. This is quite an interesting area, and it's rather criminal. There were various street stories like everyone else's, and roughly speaking, it was only my mother who raised me. My stepfather didn't really have any serious influence on me, so I grew up with the guys. Later on, there was football culture, sports, and so on.
In your honest opinion, what really sets you apart from your peers?
That's really hard to say. Honestly, I have peers who have achieved greater success in the sports I used to do. Some have done better in certain hobbies I was into, for example. I don't think there's anything that sets me apart. It's just that I have a certain energy inside me that I can feel, and this spirit of adventure constantly pushes me to do things.
Can you tell us a little more about your activities and career in football?
Well, career-wise, it was actually pretty short. There's a story, by the way, I don't remember what year it was. maybe 2010 or closer to 2011. It was Dynamo Kiev. It was a group I joined through sports, through Muay Thai. I met a guy there who eventually brought me to the Ultras, and then the idea came up, let's start our own youth crew, something of our own. So that's what we did. And, well, there were quite a few fights.
In your opinion, what role do ultras play in society?
The question isn't really about what role ultras play in society. Most likely, these are just people with a certain type of character and spirit, strong-willed individuals, and also patriots who, in difficult times, stand up to defend the country, to protect the interests of the nation, and so on.
Please tell us about your participation in the Revolution of Dignity.
That was a very interesting story. At that time, I was a college student. I think it was my final year. And on TV, I saw that something was happening, that people were gathering on the Maidan. I remember I was supposed to go to my internship. I got off at Maidan, walked toward Lobanovsky Avenue, and saw that these were the very first days of the protest, those first days of demonstrations. And I saw that some bolder things were starting to happen. Back then, I had a brand new Helly Hansen jacket I was really proud of, new Air Max sneakers, you know, just being young. And I asked the nurse for a mask to cover my face. And then I just dove right into the thick of things.
What did the Revolution of Dignity mean to you back then, and what does it mean for you now?
Back then, it was. I didn't really get the political side of it. Honestly, I didn't understand it. I just saw that on one side there were the police, and on this side there were people who were against a certain kind of lawlessness and were standing up for their rights and their honor. And probably without fully realizing it, I got swept up in that collective spirit, and I was pretty actively involved in everything that was happening there. Now it's really hard to say what's better. To lose some of our independence in the future and basically turn into another Belarus. Or to lose thousands of innocent people, but still have a chance to bravely fight for our nation. And there's this profound idea that no matter what significant challenges await us ahead, ultimate victory must be achieved at any cost. After the Revolution of Dignity, at the young age of 19, I joined what was then known as the Azov battalion.
What was on your mind during your first trip to the ATO zone?
Honestly, I wasn't thinking about anything. I remember how I left home. I told my mom that I was going to war. She knew my jackets always smelled like smoke. She knew where I kept disappearing to. On top of that, I had even lived in tents on the Maidan for a while. She understood that I was a pretty radical guy. At some point, I went up to her and said, "Mom, I'm joining the Azov battalion. I have friends there." I felt like I wanted to be with them. Well, I was 19 and I was a pretty troubled kid. I had problems at school and in college. They could have expelled me after my first year. But with tears in her eyes, she ran after me in hysterics down the street. I lived in a private house and she chased me outside, almost fainting. But I made that selfish, strong-willed decision and ended up in Kazatsky, where I had some kind of unit. Part of the time was basic military training. After that, I ended up in Azov at one of the regiment's bases, which at that time was still a battalion.
What was Azov like in 2014?
Azov was the most radical branch, brought together under a single principle. In other words, they needed people who, regardless of the mission, regardless of whether they'd get paid for it, whether there would be rewards or any kind of benefits and so on, would still get the job done. People who were as patriotic and nationalistic as possible, ready to carry out tasks for the glory of the nation, no matter what those tasks were. After all, even back then, we had lectures on nationocracy. Professors taught us this stuff directly at the bases. So it was like this interesting kind of programming being loaded into us.
What were you doing before the full-scale war?
Before the full-scale war, I was involved with a shooting range. We had our own organization, a social one, focused on civil security, and the shooting range was created on its basis. Then someone came along who invested money in our public initiative, and that's how the shooting range was created. The public initiative was focused on preparing the civilian population for certain actions aimed at defending our country. Naturally, we wanted to have our own shooting range, our own place, to take things to the next level. That's how it all happened. So I was the Chief Operating Officer of the Civil Safety Academy. Since February 24th, 2022, I have no longer been involved with this project because I am in the combat zone. Accordingly, I don't hold any management positions there, nor do I serve in any advisory capacity.
After the war is over, do you plan to return to this work?
I do plan to return to my work, but most likely it will be a new story. It won't be CSI. There are a number of things that I would certainly do quite differently and with different people, and unfortunately, or perhaps even fortunately, I still don't fully understand my partner. Some things are entirely at odds with my moral views concerning the current situation we're facing right now.
Why aren't you in Azov right now?
Well, I need to give a little background here. On February 24, when the full-scale war began, I had a group of, let's say, trusted people who knew that if war broke out, we would meet at the shooting range. And that's exactly what happened. We met at our shooting range. They looked at me with certain expectations, hoping I would take action and give them direction. It was like we were a tiny micro-unit. We got weapons and carried out missions with the 72nd Brigade. After I was wounded, someone took me in and said, "If you want to get through this war with results and stay alive, there's a good professional team I can help you join." I said, "All right."
What is Moran exactly?
It's a small team that worked. They didn't leave the war when it started, so this team has been fighting for 10 years. They're insane specialists. I can't talk about them openly. They're the kind of insane specialists who carried out extremely serious missions. And now we keep doing this, striving to make a significant difference as a small, dedicated team, consistently achieving big results.
Draw your moral conclusions from such subgroups.
The Morana ethos. What is Morana? Morana is a small group of people who made this story happen under a different flag. Some left us after Bakhmut, and we brought in new people, but the core team has stayed the same. The Morana unit is made up of highly motivated people who don't care about the area. They care that there's an enemy and that there's work to be done. And nothing gets in the way of us doing our job. That's also very important. It's like a micro-autonomous organism that, with the right resources, can achieve phenomenal results with just a small number of people.
Can a volunteer join Morana?
Actually, we can bring in someone straight from the street under the pirate flag if they're ready to take on that kind of responsibility. But let's put it this way. We're not a unit, we're an idea, we're an ideology. And right now, we're all members of the 47th Brigade. So if someone wants to join our team specifically, they'll have to go through all the standard mobilization or transfer procedures to the 47th Brigade.
How close were you to death? And under what circumstances did it happen?
Well, starting from 2014, there are a couple of very clear and distinct stories like that, when the enemy either completely missed their intended target because of their inexperience, or by some incredible stroke of luck, I miraculously survived. Let's put it this way. The most serious, significant, and pivotal moment happened on March 20th, 2022. The enemy launched a missile strike with the Kinzhal system on our positions, and 6 of my close friends were there, the ones who had come together around me on February 24th. Well, these were truly my closest friends. Imagine knowing a war is coming and you and your friends are making plans for what to do. Some agreed to go abroad, some decide to head to Western Ukraine, and others plan to go to their grandmothers. And we agreed that we would gather at the shooting range and go to war. This was my close circle. These were people I respected, loved, and valued. And then 5 of those people died at the same time. I was the one who had brought them there, realizing that I had taken on a responsibility I had never consciously agreed to. That's just how it happened. People simply believed in me, and there was work to be done. And we needed someone a bit more radical, someone who would push the team toward this work. But since everyone was a volunteer with no obligations, anyone could leave whenever they wanted. And that's exactly how it went. There were a couple of people who just left.
At the end of the day, who do you really come home to?
I used to come home for my wife, first and foremost. Then for my mom, my brother, my sister. I used to visit my grandmother. Now I spend very little time at home. I'm more. If I show up there, I spend my time on certain tasks.
Why is that?
I'm divorced.
Who came up with the idea of the divorce?
The decision to divorce was mine, but after 12 and a half years together, building a shared life, of course, there are certain things that push you toward making that difficult choice.
Did your ex-wife really share your perspective on the ongoing war?
This wonderful little person shared absolutely all my views and dedicated all her time and her whole life to me. Literally, in every sense of the word, to my beliefs. And maybe, at that point, she was losing herself, and I stopped noticing her. She is an incredibly kind person. I swear, I've never met anyone like her in my life. So far, a person who is genuinely helpful, not just for Instagram stories, does truly kind and sincere things like saving snails from the road. I mean, this is a holy, divine person. This person is like God, an angel on earth.
Do you regret the divorce?
I don't regret losing what we had because it couldn't exist in that form. Each of us had to go down this path after the divorce to realize what is valuable and what truly matters. To know wisdom, because wisdom is that depth which can only be reached when you dive into it, and you only understand certain things after you've experienced pain. Openness and loneliness, and of course I communicated with the people around me. Now, being with the people around me, I realized that this person is wonderful, selfless, and amazing. But in the format we've had lately, the way things have been these past few days, it just couldn't go on. So this is a story where I killed it with my indifference, and it doesn't make me happy.
If you get another chance, would you try again with her?
If we can reset ourselves so that we reach a new level in our relationship with each other and let everything go, all the bad things that happened between us during the time we were together, then maybe it will work. Maybe it won't be the perfect family, but maybe it could. I don't know, maybe not.
Have you ever done something in your life that goes completely against your deeply held principles?
You know, principles, there's something that can change with age, with what's happening in the country, with what's happening in the family. I've lived a life. I was a decent family person for a full 12 and a half years. And I lived that life with my wife, honestly. She was my first wife, and throughout all those years, she never once cheated. But when the full-scale war started, when I lost friends, when I lost the person who had saved me from under that rubble, he was the only one who came out unscathed at that moment, and he came to help. And he died, that man. I gave in to selfishness. It's a very powerful story when you realize that at any moment you could be gone from this life, and then you have a choice to make. Either you do something you've never done before, something you might have wanted to do, but your principles never allowed you to, or you live this life selfishly, just for today, because you never know when you might die. By that time, our relationship with my wife was already pretty strained, so I just let loose.
Tell me about your biggest fear.
Maybe fear is. It comes with a strong feeling of vulnerability, and that vulnerability is enough. It would often come over me, and if I can put it this way, the moments when I felt vulnerable were the scariest ones. Those were the episodes in my life because all sorts of thoughts came out of that vulnerability. But to put it simply, there was also a basic, physical, gut-level, instinctive fear. I experienced it when I was trapped under the rubble in that situation where a missile hit us and we were all buried. At that moment, I had already realized that my legs were probably broken. And because the building we were in, it was a shopping mall, and there was a really advanced fire suppression system there, which poured out thousands of liters of water. Of course, when the fire started, the system kicked in, releasing water everywhere. And when you're lying under the rubble, the water starts flowing into those spaces. I have certain fears and phobias about how my life might end. And probably the biggest one is suffocation. And when the water started coming in, as a junior commander, I had a Makarov pistol. And that pistol, I put it at my feet because I wasn't ready to accept that kind of ending. You know, you're just lying there. You see the water starting to flood in, and you can literally count down the seconds to your death. You're lying there thinking, is this it for me? In a few minutes, you'll be dead. This kind of death is terrifying, you know, like something out of a movie. Why are we afraid of certain things? Are we afraid of the dark? It's because we've watched too many movies, and there's always something scary hiding in the darkness. In the same way, we know what happens to people when they drown. And it's better to do it the way I wanted.
You mentioned that a specialist sent you to locate a particular person.
What kind of person was this? This was my close friend, Ylavsev Maxim, his call sign. His football-related canopy, I don't know what to call it, was a Rikbist. A man of the highest caliber, kind, bright, pure, with an untainted soul. And that's where the main pain comes from. Life, fate, God. If all of that exists, then why did this person die? If all of that exists, then why did Roma, who was my biggest fan, die? A fan as a person. I loved him like my own brother, and he died too. There was Toha, who was kind and bright. Deep down, he treated his family better. Roma treated his family better than I did. But these people died, and I stayed alive. That's why death feels so random. It doesn't have any kind of God behind it. Hell is right here. And those people who survive going through situations like this, they either lead themselves towards something bright or spend their whole lives living in hell. So hell is inside us, right here. Everything is given to us.
If you knew that in 3 days you would be gone, how would you spend those 3 days?
That's a very difficult question because right now we're sitting in such a warm studio atmosphere. The world looks beautiful and it's easy to philosophize about this topic. But maybe if that situation actually happened, I would visit all my relatives. They are scattered across different countries. Not in Ukraine, but my grandmother, she lives somewhere in the Chernihiv region. My mom lives even closer, further on. And I would like to spend days with them.
What or who are you most proud of in your life?
I don't really have any big idols. I treat people with great respect and without any sense of envy toward those who have achieved more. One of my most valuable qualities, I think, is that I don't envy but learn from others, and I probably can't really name any kind of superhero. You know, there have been many situations in my life where I lacked courage. I'm quite a cowardly person, and my whole life path reflects a desire to prove the opposite. I mean, around football, sports, war, Maidan, war, the first part, the second part. It's all about proving to myself first and foremost that I'm not a coward. In other words, all the challenges that come to us from the outside are really our fears. They're some kind of childhood shortcomings inside.
How do you feel about people who tell the truth to your face?
That's totally fine. The truth to my face. I really like criticism straight to my face. Real criticism from people who have achieved more than I have. That's just a great thing, even if it's harsh. Once, I came to my friend with the CSA project. He's a really big developer. This was before shooting range, before the partnership and all that. He criticized me really harshly, just tore me apart. This is a really cool thing. You're a cool guy, but where's the money here? At that moment, I actually absorbed more experience from his words than it broke me.
Right now, there's a lot of talk about freezing the war. In your opinion, how do the military perceive this?
The military want both victory and an end to this war. Because this is a story about losing. If we work there for 2 months being spent, that's one story. When infantrymen, assault troops work being spent, that's another story. And unfortunately, when it comes to saying that the war cannot be frozen, well, that's obvious. These are absolutely objective things. You can't do that, because we'll end up with an even bigger war. And the soldiers in that war will be our children. Can we really keep losing our people like this, the way it's happening now? I don't think so. I think, first of all, we need to reset the whole system of conducting military operations.
In your opinion, will the war end?
It won't end soon, that's obvious. Nothing surprising there. But if for us the war ends with us preserving even just one territory, one region, our flag, anthem, coat of arms, and national language, then maybe that will already be a victory. In the sense that future generations, inspired by our struggle, just as we are inspired by the underground resistance, by the Ukrainian People's Republic, by the Cossacks, by the Hetmanate, maybe they will be inspired too and continue to reclaim the territories we've lost. How possible is that? I don't know. The enemy is very strong. Society underestimated them, but this is a powerful adversary with unlimited people. I saw this firsthand when we were in Bakhmut. In particular, convicts were shown no mercy, just wiped out by the tens of thousands. I witnessed it. At the Avdiivka front, with regular assaults, sparing no one and nothing, they send them along the same routes. Only a few roads lead to the positions, and they're destroyed there. They burn by the hundreds. Hundreds of their vehicles have been destroyed on the Avdiivka front, near Krasnohorivka. and they just keep doing it. Their resources never seem to run out, but ours do. And in this mode, in a defensive mode, as you can see for yourself, we are also losing ground in certain areas of the front.
Would you want to be an agent for one of the intelligence services?
An agent for one of the intelligence services. That's an interesting question. Adventure, romance, creativity. Let's put it this way, it's like chess. With real people, it's a fascinating story, and maybe yes, maybe it does sound romantic. I would really like to keep working in the military after the war. There are some things you can never forget, and there are others you can never forgive. Let's just say that all this time, being kind of half disabled, I've been running purely on hatred and on the kind of work where that hatred can be put to use. So if, when the war ends, a suitable occupation emerges where I can effectively channel all my profound animosity and deep-seated resentment toward these specific individuals, then no. Punishment has to come in the form of real tangible things. Unfortunately, we're supposed to rely on some higher powers to save us by punishing them.
Do you truly think that you are a role model for others?
It's hard to say. I was sharing my thoughts about this situation with my wife. Like, am I some kind of knight of the 21st century carrying united family ideals and moral values? But after what happened with the divorce, I'm not sure I can be any kind of example. It's just that if I inspire someone that after a serious injury, wounds, broken bones, I spent 52 days bedridden, then was in a wheelchair, that I got up and had enough motivation and courage to go to war. If that can be an example for someone, I'm glad for that.
What does success mean to you?
Great question. So, success in business is measured by money, by the demand for your service or product. And so, let's put it this way. At the shooting range, when we were engaged in that activity, I was striving for as many people as possible to find out about us, to popularize our brand as much as possible, so that we would become number one in our niche. Even having some kind of super competitors like Ibis, Swole, and so on. In some aspects, we even managed to surpass them. We entered the niche with official square courses, and that was quite a breakthrough. As for work, when it comes to some personal moments, you want to do things in this life that people will remember you for. And regardless of whether it's just about money, there's always a chance to go down in history as a person. I was raised by my grandmother. She's a very smart woman, just like that. Historically, it happened that she moved from a big Russian city and now lives with my grandfather in the Chernihiv region. She raised me on a certain kind of classic Russian literature. She told me different poems and made me learn them by heart. And at that time, I was so deeply impressed by Vladimir Vysotsky because she even had his records. I was just acted like my grandmother, and I liked him too. Later, when I grew up at a more conscious age, after experiencing a bit of patriotic and nationalist life, my inspiration to this day has been Roman Shukevich. He was a person who, From 1944 until his death in 1950, lived under extremely harsh and difficult conditions, where his profound love for the nation and his genuine commitment were truly tested, showing how far he was willing to dedicate his entire life to this cause. He could have gone abroad, but he didn't take his people with him. He knew he was a doomed man, and all the women connected to him knew it too. They carried special capsules under their collars so that if they were captured, they could take their own lives. These are the kind of people with strong moral will. You want to strive to be like them. You want to touch them. In 1950, that house, back then it was the Lviv region, now it's part of Lviv. There, the Russians launched a rocket into this house, where he fought his last battle, where they carried out his arrest. And the memory of him disturbs them so much, they fear him so deeply, that even the only sacred place where there was at least some connection to this legendary figure, they destroyed it with a rocket. No one knows where his body is buried. They burned him, his ashes. They say his son scattered his ashes in the Zbruch River, but in an interview with Gordon, he said that the story about the Zbruch is all a lie. The main point about this person is that no matter where your path leads you, it's important to keep your love for your nation and for the people who trust you along the way.
Would you change anything in your life?
I wouldn't change anything in my life because it's all experience. And this experience makes me who I am now. If I had skipped some periods of my early youth, I wouldn't be so broken, but definitely a damaged person. My youth story left a pretty strong mark. It really affected me. And I think that if those moments were missing, maybe in the future, or even now, there are some mistakes I wouldn't have made.
If you had the chance to meet your younger self, what would you truly say to yourself?
That's a good question. I'd probably tell myself to devote more time to sports, to building moral and willpower qualities, to developing what I already had, but with greater intensity, and to dedicate myself more to those kinds of sports pursuits. Because I was in one place, then another, then a third, then a fourth, I never really stayed anywhere for long. I should have focused on one thing after all, to toughen my character and strengthen my inner qualities. Do I want to change myself now? I'm working on that right now. I want to change myself when it comes to family relationships, selfishness. I want to change myself in terms of certain things I do, but changing some things from the past is pointless because it's unclear. If you change them, where will that road lead next?
What's something you regret doing?
I regret that while I was officially married, I cheated on my wife.
If you were to write a book, what title would you give it?
I'm writing a book, but it's more like a story that helps me make sense of a period of my life that I've lived through, so that not just to think about it, but to convey this idea in such a format of expression, to be as honest with myself as possible, and so that other people can see it too. The book will be called Meja in Ukrainian. It's a kind of philosophical, psychological thing.
What would you teach your child?
Oh, that's a really wonderful thing. I dream about having 2 girls. We came up with names like little stars, the queens of the galaxy, Venus, and Zemfira. I don't really know love. Love is that kind of thing. It probably still shows itself on a physiological level. First of all, love is that person with whom, over time, your scent, your warmth, your bodies become as close as possible. When you can just turn to that person and hug them. And all these things I mentioned immerse you in complete calm. And you fall asleep. Love is a feeling of peace, security, and eternity.
What is something every person should do at least once in their life?
I'm sitting here all serious and wound up. And it seems to me that we need to add a bit more liveliness. I think that every person in our life... In life, let's put it this way. We're not interested in those who are not of our kin. Every Ukrainian has to kill at least one Russian. That would be just perfect.
What important lessons would you want to pass on to your daughters?
Our whole life is a struggle with your own fears, a struggle for some kind of social status, a struggle for the country, a struggle for the nation. And I would like to pass on that. Keep fighting, and you will win.